Okay, so let's get started for today. Today I wanted to talk about how to work with reference while painting a texture. So we talked about metal and hair and the theory behind metal and hair, but how do you bring that theory over when you're watching from a reference, when you're learning off of a reference? If you want to also get your work critiqued and you want to be a part of this texture series, go to istebrak.com. Attending class is free. Handing in your homework is free. Live streams are free. Getting a critique is free. You don't have to pay for any of this. It's all 100% free. Any money that goes into the class is just voluntary. So Patreon, etc. So what you want to do is click on the subreddit icon here. So if you click here, it'll take you to the subreddit. And that's where you can join all kinds of really cool challenges, just like the texture challenge I posted up here. Let's talk about textures. So clouds, hair, metallic surfaces, and fabric. Fabric and clouds will be next week. Another big announcement is, do you guys remember the Floral Humanoids Design Challenge? Anyone remember that? We're going to do another one for spring. It's going to be really fun because this one is going to be a little bit it's going to be the same challenge essentially, but it's going to be there's going to be some texture requirements for it just so that you guys can show off the texture knowledge you learned. But that one is going to be like a full-blown same old challenge that we used to do, 1 hour, hour and a half. Winners will attend in the call, and the winners will get a copy of Portrait Studio in my masterclass. It's going to be a whole thing, and I'll announce it very soon, but it is for the spring, so it's like a March, April type of challenge towards the end of, or beginning of spring, end of winter. So let's get started with this. Using reference can be very complicated because you have to alter your reference for it to be manageable for you with your beginner eyes. You have beginner eyes. It means that you aren't soaking in all the information you could. It means that you are overwhelmed by most of the information that you're seeing. So this is a revised version after they watched my video. So they did try to clump up and piece together certain things, and it looks better. But if they feel very timid with the rest of the detail, in fact, everything feels very overblended and very cautious. So if you are confused, take your reference into Photoshop and alter it. Have multiple layers open. So Control J to copy layers. Unlock this one. The first layer is going to be blurred. So filter, blur, Gaussian blur. This will actually show you what brushstrokes are expected of you and which are not, meaning that if we take a look at where it was before, pick a spot. Do you see how much excessive detail was there? You're really only expected to paint this and then just see this eyebrow line. This eyebrow line is the line of detail. It's the line of detail that we need from the eyebrows moving back this way. You can alter your reference so your reference meets you halfway and you meet your reference halfway. That way you're not doing the entire walk there to your reference with all that 100% detail visible. Stop doing that to yourself. You're setting yourself up for failure. Take a look at where it was before. You have way too much detail. Obviously it's a photo, so it looks more clear, but it's useless to a student that's not ready. This now is good for referencing because it looks closer to a painting. A student has an easier time studying off of a painting and a master study than studying off of a harsh reference just like this. Do you see that? So we're seeing these two huge zones. If you don't see it, squint your eyes. All right, so squint your eyes. On average, watch this jumper right here. Watch the little fairy. You're going to see it jump around more towards the upper half of the picker and more towards the lower half of the picker when we're on the dark side. That should be reflected in the values that you pick. Really, the biggest thing that we want to fix right now are the brush strokes. So we want to make sure there are real clumps that are not repeated. So this one and this one and this one all look like they're the same size. Whereas in the reference, you've got this one that's thick and then thin, two of the same size, and then followed by a thicker one. And then this one, because it's messy, we'll just call it thick. So we're looking at thick, medium, thin, thin, and then medium. That's nice and random, where here you have medium, 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 all behind each other, following each other. So you have to stay randomized. You have to stay a little bit like unpredictable. You have to just act like you're fighting a boss and they can predict your moves, so you have to do unpredictable moves to win, or else your friends get captured or something. I've been watching too much One Piece. So you have to be very, very random with it. And then that's turning into that. And so now it's looking a little bit more interesting. And then not just that, not just the highlights have to be thick, the shadows also have to be thick. And I'm just trying to follow this general pattern. I'm using the skin tone. Look at the reference. The skin tone melts in and merges in with the rest of the hair tone. And then in a new layer, I'm going to bring in the flyaways. And this is where hair starts to look like hair, which is why students fall for the trap of using only flyaways to paint hair. And again, you have to be random. You have to be a little bit crazy. These are the hairs that come out and kind of cause trouble. They don't really stay down. Smudge tool itself can create a motion blur. Smudge tool on a big size, if you mess with it back and forth, back and forth. So I'm doing a little pulsing motion. I was going to show you guys this trick for clouds with the smudge brush, smudge tool. But this is a great opportunity to use it as well. And then just over here, same thing. I'm just picking that spot and then just kind of smudging it out. This kind of spreads the brush stroke so that it's hardly visible, but also helps to connect it back to the painting. So I eventually merge all layers together. I really don't keep layers separated for too long, because the benefits that you get from being able to smudge are just too great for you to be working outside of each layer, away from each layer like that. Then one more industry secret: get sharpen tool and use it along that arc that I told you guys about. So that's how you work with reference. You adjust your reference, you locate the core shadow, you understand the texture, you take your time, you slow down, and then you identify basically everything that's needed from you from the texture. So the saturation line, the flyaway hairs, and the visibility, like the blur, the concept of blur itself. So before, it looked oily, right? It looked like oily lumps. And it's that, you know, awkward stage when you're doing texture studies where you're not 100% sure where you're supposed to go next, because this artist was doing everything right, but there was just something missing. And it's because I believe that they were overwhelmed by the reference they had before, which had just way too much visibility on it and way too much like information. It's not a bad thing to have information, but when you have a brain that's not used to it, you are asking the brain to do too much. Art is fighting your brain. Write that back to me. Art is a constant wrestle, a constant struggle against your brain's stubbornness. But the brain is just also, that's not really nice, because the brain is busting its butt every day to try to understand things for you and do the tasks that you need from it. And it's amazing, and it's always doing its job, and it's a wonderful tool nature gave us. So it's just not its fault, because up until you decided, hey, I want to draw the people that I have in my mind, up until that moment, your brain didn't have to give you any extra data. All of a sudden, you're demanding that it can draw realistic hair and shapes and all that, and it's just like, I'm confused. Why do you need this? But then eventually, it goes along and it starts understanding what it needs to see, what you need for it to see before you work. So you and your brain, you see how I'm talking? It's kind of like you are versus your brain, or your brain is a separate entity. But once you understand what the brain's habits are, you become a team together. There's you and what you want, and there's the limitations and habit building that's required for learning anything. And as a teacher, I like to remind students, your brain is a separate entity. It's not a reflection of your lack of skill or anything. Your brain's just not used to it. So before, after, more detail presence, a nice little bit of smudge here and there. If you want to submit texture studies, you can do so through istebrak.com and click on the subreddit icon here. It'll take you to the subreddit, and that way you can join us for the continuation of this texture series. So next up, next week is hair and cloud. Next week is clouds and fabric. Some people have already started submitting fabric and clouds. Thank you so much. But again, I don't have a class until somebody submits the work. So please make sure you guys are doing clouds and fabric. These two are really opposite to each other, but they do have one thing in common, and I'll show you guys what that is next class. Thank you everyone for coming. If you learned something today, please consider supporting me on Patreon for $1 a month. It goes a long way if everybody joins in. And that's it. I'll see you guys next time. Bye bye.